Hello everyone, welcome to the second season of our project An Outside Opinion. My name is Oleg Hrybatyuk and I am the head of NGO Center of United Actions. My guests are the ambassadors who represent the states of successful democracies and working systems of checks and balances. We are discussing the Ukrainian path to European Union, the reforms and recovery, and how the world security system should look after the war. Today my guest is Anneli Kolk, the Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary of the Republic of Estonia to Ukraine. So we would like to start from first question about Estonia. As I remember, you were in the first wave of EU enlargement. What were the major lessons you believe from your experience of covering this path if you think about today's Ukraine? Clearly I can't ask you how long it would take, but what advice you could probably give us, keeping in mind your experience?
Well, yeah, thank you. Thank you for this question. And yes, our path was 9 years. I mean, starting from the presenting the application and until the actual membership. But to be honest, well, our path started in 1997, which was not very far away from regaining the independence. So the beginning was really hard. We had all this, Soviet style of institutions, so everything was a little bit different. And in our case, there was this sense of urgency, of course, but when I compared it to the situation of Ukraine, well, you have already had more than 20 years of independence, so you are starting from, more advanced position as we started. And to be honest, when I see all these reforms Ukraine has already done during the war, so I think that your path would be definitely quicker. And to be honest, you have more friends in Europe right now who are all ready to help you, and in all this path. And also, as I said, that you have already done tremendously all these reforms, and I think that when I see the will and the resilience and what is happening in the society, so I think that definitely your path would be easier. I'm telling, it's not easy. It's really difficult. It was very, very difficult for Estonia. All these clusters, all these reforms, everything we had to do. But my advice would be not to give up. Definitely not to give up. Because once you make all these reforms and you became the member of the European Union, then it gets only easier. And you have to, what I would also like to suggest, that you please don't expect the quick road. Just make it really step by step, because take it as creating the base or the fundament for the house. So you cannot skip some steps. Because in the European Union, there are 27 member states, and everything is so interrelated. And so there is a problem. If you skip one step, it would be really difficult, later. So you need to come back. So really take very seriously all these chapters, all these clusters, and of course, continue as you have been doing. You have been doing tremendous job. And what is also very positive for you, that the European Commission, Council, so they all are on your side. So it's really like everybody wanting Ukraine to be in the European Union. And which wasn't the case maybe when we started, But now when we look back to all this, well, I was also part of that when we started all this, and there were many moments when we thought, why do we need, do we really need this? Or, but once we were there and now we understand this was all really necessary, important, and also as a country, as a society, and especially for the civil society, for the democratic principles, we learned a lot during this process.
Reforms, reforms, reforms. The head of EU office recently, after that decision, so much expected about providing Ukraine with 50 billion assistance for the next 4 years term, she said that nothing changed. It means you should go on with the reforms, but there are sometimes, not so seldom, I would say, questions that, come on, we are in the middle of the biggest war since World War II. Do we still have to continue reforms despite the war, or maybe we should wait until war is over and then come back to reforms?
That's a very valid question, to be honest. But I think that what will be one of your ultimate goals, you know, to defeat Russia and to win this victory, is to be part of the European Union. I know, of course, there is war, but like I said, you have already done tremendous job in all these reforms, you know, regarding these 4 steps. So you have really gone half the way already. And I think because when you are already the member of the European Union, and if you haven't applied or if you haven't had these reforms, the relations between the member states of the European Union, the relations between the institutions, they are so much interrelated. Once you do not have these laws or regulations passed now, it will be very difficult for you and also for the other countries to sort of match it all together. And the main goal is for Ukraine to really benefit from the European Union, from the membership, and also for the EU member countries to benefit from Ukraine being the member of the European Union. And once you have all these, I'm not even talking about the reforms, I mean just the changes of laws, all the regulations, all this. So it will be, once you are there, so you are there.
Estonia is one of our best, most active promoters, envoys, ambassadors to EU, but there are voices also in EU of some countries who are not so much enthusiastic, who are talking about fatigue. Orban recently said that Ukraine should stay somewhere in between, not member at all, in buffer zone. What do you think about this? And do you feel the threat from a potential enlargement and Ukraine membership from these voices?
Well, I have to be honest with you. There is no fatigue of Ukraine in the European Union. Maybe there are sometimes fatigue of, let's say, of sanctions or, you know, some of the decisions. Definitely not the fatigue of the of helping the Ukraine. And also, what is Estonia's main goal? As you said, we are one of your biggest supporters, together with the other Baltics and Poland, is also to talk every day, you know, with the other member states in the European Union, in Brussels, that, you know, listen, you know, what is happening here. And now we all understand, especially the other member states, that now we are entering the crucial times. And we also have to take account what is happening in the, let's say, military aid, or in the other big allies, let's say. So the European countries are getting more and more on the understanding that we cannot rely only on the big allies. We have to also, you know, spend more ourselves on the defense. And in that regard, of course, the Ukraine is #1 priority. So I wouldn't say that that there is this fatigue. Of course, there are, 27 countries, and they have also, many countries have other, not priorities, but other interests in some other countries. So it's really understandable that sometimes they need to deal, with the other, but it's definitely not a threat. And I would like to emphasize this the understanding or the issues. This only feeds Russian propaganda. Only, to show that European Union is not maybe that united anymore, or that there are these internal issues. And also, what is your what is really helping you is that the European Commission is on your side. It doesn't happen very often. So you are really, and all this threat, it's really, this is my personal opinion, of course, but I think it only feeds Russian propaganda. Everything that also happens with the propaganda about, the Hungary's Orban or Fico, from Slovakia. But you see, in the end, in the European Union, nothing happened like that. Yeah, we can talk about this, who asked who to the coffee, but this is still, European Union is united, and we shouldn't. We should fight for this propaganda that there is a threat from the European Union side. I think it's opposite. The European Union is really united and gets even more because we all understand that the war, the full-scale war, is entering the third phase, and many countries see that the threat is coming nearer. So of the Russian Federation. So there is no threat from this part of the European Union member states. No, definitely not.
And we already touched this issue about this a really very important decision to provide Ukraine with 50 billion at the background with delays of financing from US Congress. But there were lots of speculations. We burned tons of nerves because still till the last day there was the threat of Orban again blocking, vetoing that decision. And this becomes quite a problem. At least I have to answer quite often to Ukrainian media about how EU can neutralize these risks, because it looks absurd that there are 26 countries out of 27 making decisions, and one country can block it, not even bothering to justify. There is another enlargement. There might be, I don't know, 9 more new members. And I remember talking to a German ambassador who was kind of nostalgic, saying, oh, those were the days. We had 6 countries. Every minister could talk minimum half an hour. And what is going now? We have like 2 minutes and no discussions. We need some mechanisms. How do you see prerequisites or possible mitigation of this kind of risks in not allowing 1 or 2 spoilers to stop almost unanimous decision of other EU members?
Well, yeah, as a diplomat, of course, I have to start with this, that, European Union is, 27 member states. Everybody has their voice. And there are so many decisions that are taken by the qualified majority. Of course, you know that. I mean, by the anonymity. There are also decisions that can be taken by the qualified majority, but everything that is happening in the discussions in the European Union, well, there have always been this. There are some countries against this or that, and of course, I'm not saying any names or any countries, but there are always these issues of internal policy, which unfortunately are also presented more in the discussions in the European Union. And Of course, I have to tell you that your path to the European Union, like I said, it won't be easy. And there are 70 more places where you need the anonymity of all 27 member states. It's opening the 70 more steps. There'll be opening of clusters, closing clusters, and we also encourage you to talk bilaterally, to really talk with these countries whom you see might be problematic, especially because sometimes there are these bilateral issues. And but I can tell you that there are, of course, these talkings also now inside the European Union. Let's say there is even a non-paper, so maybe we can do some areas that there is needed the qualified majority on some, especially the technical issues. So there cannot be one or two countries to block everything. Estonia is also sort of supporting these initiatives. We will see how it will go, but I am quite optimistic and that there will be consensus of all the countries in the path of you. And like I said, sometimes, of course, it's regrettable. Some of the leaders are bringing their internal policies to the talks inside the European Union. But also, as I said, when you are in Brussels, when you are in all these meetings, it's not that tragic as sometimes some countries want to show them outside, especially the propagandists. And so it's more like sometimes it's more in the media than actually is happening in the European Union. And also, like I said, the European Commission is very much on your side. Ursula von der Leyen is, she's one of their biggest supporters. And already she told months ago that, well, there are ways that the European Union can sort of discover, and this help to Ukraine is not going to be stuck on one or two member states.
How the war affected Estonia and the EU? In what way? How you can describe it? And what lessons has Estonia and the EU learned from the war we are facing now in Ukraine?
Well, I have to say that the brutal Russian war against Ukraine has actually affected the whole world. Maybe it's not seen that much right now, but it has hugely impacted, because many countries around the world have understood that what was built after the world order, that was built after the Second World War, and the principles of the UN Charter, everything, that they are now also somehow under the threat. So what regards to the Estonia, well, we have told the whole world over the last 30 years, to be honest, and also other Baltics, that there is a threat from the Russia. I mean, we shouldn't trust them so much. We have to be very cautious, and so we were foreseen that something bad will happen. That Russia has these aspirations. They have had it over the centuries. Even after the collapse of the Soviet Union, they started little by little again to rebuild their strategy of the big empire. And but of course the world was shocked about the brutality of the Russian aggression, and that has changed a lot, and that has especially changed the security situation in Europe, or how the countries see that over the last, let's say, of course, after the 2014, but especially after the full-scale war, that maybe these principles of humanity, rule of order, democracy, they are all under the threat. And it can be only, you know, with the, you know, with this one country. And so this has changed a lot. And if you see now the many countries, especially in the Europe, they are all starting to talk about the defense, the expenditures on the, you know, the defense capabilities. So this all sort of comes back. There are many issues that we couldn't even think 10 years ago. Let's say countries enjoying the NATO and, you know, all these security issues. So this has changed a lot. And not that much of Estonia, because we were sort of, we had our strategy for that. We knew that, well, we cannot trust the Putin regime, but I think it was more shock for the Western Europe, and the more longer the war goes on against Ukraine, and the more we talk about it, we publish it, we need to reach to the global partners, you know, to the other countries as well, and to really show what is happening here. And so this is really has changed a lot, and you can already see the many countries thinking the new relationship or the unions of the other countries. So this is really has changed dramatically the situation in the 21st century.
You feel secure, and most of European countries feel secure because you are members of NATO. There is interesting experience when Sweden and Finland applied, and before Sweden still cannot make it. For obvious reasons.
Because of one country, again, well, the same?
Yeah, has its own special stance. But Finland and Sweden, they received kind of umbrella of Article 5, being not members of NATO, but they got this guarantees. And word guarantee here is proper, because in Ukraine, there is this big discussions going on about these documents which we have signed with Britain. Like number of countries have are at different stages of reaching this guarantees agreement. But in reality, I have to say, this is actually not real guarantee. You cannot compare it to Article 5. But what could be? How do you see what could be the possible guarantees against, even after the Russians would be kicked out of Ukraine, so they would not attack again? What is their formula? Or you believe, as I believe, that you can't invite another bicycle, it should be membership in NATO. But we all understand that. But what in between? Because that period, we have applied, but it can take years, and nobody knows. But we desperately need this security assurances, okay, let's say it, assurances or commitments.
Yeah, definitely. But I will start from the first question. Of course, the only guarantee for Ukraine for the further, you know, aggression, it's membership, the full membership in NATO. It's the full membership in NATO, and it's a full membership in NATO. So we all need to work really hard that Ukraine becomes the member of the NATO. You are, anyways, well, you are in Europe, you belong to the NATO. This is for Estonia and for the many other countries, the ultimate goal. We are working, you know, we have worked with these before the Vilnius summit, before, you know, other NATO summits, now really working hard for the Washington summit. But of course, before getting there, there need to be some security, let's say, assurances for the Ukraine, that we are still there until you become the member of the NATO. And like you said, there is this G7 declaration on the security guarantees, and many countries, yes, have started, especially the G7 countries. Already, yes, UK has signed it, but we know that there will be a couple of other countries who have sort of in the final stage, and that
Canada, France,
yes,
but maybe others.
Yeah, and also Estonia has also started this process. We had last week visit of the Deputy Foreign Minister to Ukraine, and we had a meeting with the Office of the President, Mr. Zvovka. We presented our draft, so we are also in the process of starting the negotiations. As the Estonians, we want to finish them as quickly as possible. I'm sure we will be again pioneering in that. And but what I also would like to emphasize that these guarantees or these agreements, they are not going to replace NATO. So NATO for the Ukraine is the ultimate goal. Once you are in NATO, these guarantees, you know, they are not, well, the Article 4, Article 5, the NATO is the ultimate goal. But until then, yes, we need these guarantees also to show Russia that you will be part of the NATO. And until all the procedures, and of course when there is still the full-scale war, it's very difficult for Ukraine to become the part of NATO during this. But we hope all that the war will be over, you know, as soon as possible. So until then, yes, there are these bilateral agreements, and I'm sure that there will be many of them, and they will differ a little bit, but they are all about the political commitments, the military commitments, and all the other you know, possible commitments to Ukraine that you are not left alone.
Since Estonia became member of the EU, and you know, some countries, they have a very special features by which you can recognize them. Estonia got this reputation of country which was first to start digitalization, electronic governance. Estonia for Ukrainians became kind of inspiring nation because we tried to do similar things when I was first time in the government after Orange Revolution. But now we are really partners. Now digitalization is the word which became part of Ukrainian vocabulary. Do you think that we can be partners in something else? And how do you view as potential spheres of effective cooperation between Estonia and Ukraine?
Oh yes, this to say this digitalization, IT, I can talk about hours about this. But of course, there are so many areas we can cooperate more, and we are already cooperating more. Regarding, there is this Tallinn mechanism launched, which was the main idea of the Estonia. We have also, you are part of the IT coalition, and also now we are more focusing our cooperation on the cyber security field. And also, if you know this Estonian e-government agency, the EGA, they have been working in Ukraine for more than 10 years. And they are providing the programs for the government regarding the TIA project. So there is a lot of cooperation between Ukraine and Estonia. And now we are really focusing on this Tallinn mechanism. And your President Zelensky, when he was in his last visit in Estonia, just a couple of months ago, he also mentioned this Tallinn mechanism, the IT coalition. So this is also what we should cooperate really. And what I also would like to say, what I have heard from Estonian cyber defense, or you know, the IT communities, that now it's also time that Ukraine has advanced so much in the IT field, that there is also a lot Estonia can actually learn from your experiences, because especially of the war and everything that you had to adopt here really quickly, and so I see this really like a two-way cooperation.
Life after the death, Ukraine after the victory, reconstruction, recovery. How do you see that process? There are lots of talk about how to do it, through which institutions. There are many discussions within Ukraine among Americans, Europeans, how Ukraine should get this maximum confidence from investors, because I clearly understand it would be not so much about government's money. Absolute majority of potential resources should come from investors. So what Ukraine is expected to do from your point of view?
Well,
to have this confidence.
Yeah. I will start from this, that actually Estonia was one of the first countries to say that Ukraine should start reconstruction already during the wartime, to not wait until the end. Start right now. And Estonia is also one of the first countries who is really helping to reconstructions already since the beginning of the full-scale war. We have chosen the Zhytomyr Oblast as our partner oblast, so we have built a kindergarten, a bridge, and we think that Ukraine should also concentrate to start reconstructions already now. And once the war is over, you don't need to start from the beginning. And this also helps if you find the partners also from the foreign companies who are coming here to help you with the reconstruction. So this all builds also the confidence. And of course, what I also have to say, what is very important is all these reforms that you have to pass to give the confidence to the investors, and this path to the European Union itself, it also gives the confidence to the donors, and so you are really now doing the right things, and I am sure that the confidence is there, and especially after your victory. There will be many European, foreign companies who have already had the sort of partners here, and who will build up on this confidence. And so this is my advice: do these reforms, because investors really need this certainty. It's not only about this security situation because of war, but it's also about the rule of law, about the business environment. It's all about that, and it all comes from the reforms. So this would be my advice.
Thank you, Madam Ambassador. It's, the country, Baltic countries, your country, are a big inspiration for us. You never accepted the fact that you are occupied and you have become part of the one nation, as Putin is talking about Ukrainians. Therefore, when we are fighting for our independence, we know that it's the issue of time only. So thank you again for standing with us, and soon we'll be in the one family.
Of course, absolutely. And I would also like to thank Ukraine for fighting, for being so brave, and for fighting all these principles of democracy, and of course you are inspiration for us. We have a common history. We know we have all been occupied by the Soviet Union, so we know what is at stake, and definitely we are not ready to become part of this brutal empire again. So we will do our utmost, and I see that there is unity in the European Union, in the Europe, and definitely you will win the war.